The themes of today's show is a room at the table. So I've been thinking about rooms and who gets to come into them and who gets to sit at the table. I come from a family of 6, 3 boys, 3 girls, and only 9 years between the eldest and the youngest. Now, if you're going to have 6 kids, all under the age of 9, and you don't want to lose one in Dunnes Stores or accidentally leave one home alone at the mercy of incompetent burglars while you go on holidays, you need to be organized. Thankfully, Mammy Bliss is indeed organized. In fact, she's so organized that she even gave birth to us with the kind of military precision that would impress Kim Jong-un. We arrived in order, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. Mammy Bliss thinks North Korean military parades are sloppy. I was number 5 between my sisters 4 and 6. For organizational purposes, my mother would regularly divide us 6 into 2 groups of 3, the evil ones and the good ones. No, I'm kidding. The older ones and the younger ones. Now, much to the chagrin of myself and my sisters 4 and 6, we were known as the babes. And we were always lumped in together, where, as far as we could see, we always got the short end of the stick. We had an earlier bedtime, weren't allowed to stay up to watch MASH on the telly, were taken to the dentist together, and generally not allowed to do the things that the older 3 were allowed to do. Life, we 3 babes concluded, wasn't fair. An observation that was irrefutable and undeniable at meal times. Like I'm sure all families, we each had our own place at the big rectangular table, our own spot where we always sat. And we 3 babes were sat together along one side on a kind of bench or banquette that had a hinged lid that could be lifted open, and inside we stored toys and board games and ping-pong bats and other assorted bits and pieces, the flotsam and jetsam of a big family with 6 kids. It wasn't a bad seat, it was comfortable enough, but it set us apart from the older 3 and our parents, who had chairs. One each, individual chairs of their own, chairs that could be moved independently, shifted or shunted closer to or further back from the table for comfort. We 3 babes had no such independence on our shared bench that was attached to the wall. But at least we were still at the table. Some years at Christmas we'd have visitors, aunts, uncles, cousins, various waifs and strays, and our family of 8 would suddenly swell to 10 or 12 or 14, swell to a number that was too big for our big family table. You couldn't accommodate them all. And so Mammy Bliss would instruct us to get out the small table. The small table was a clever little table whose top folded neatly down in 2 leaves till it almost took up no space at all, and which spent most of its time tucked away out of sight behind an armchair in the living room till it was wanted. Mostly, it was pulled out in the evenings and put in the middle of the living room floor, its leaves unfolded so it could hold, a pot of tea, a jug of milk, sugar, maybe some biscuits or a few slices of brown bread and some cheese. Help yourself. Shut up, I'm trying to listen to the news. Not on a school night, you're not. Is there anything left in that pot? Pot's Anne doiled unto her hair. But at Christmas with visitors, it would be conscripted into service to bolster the seating capacity for the turkey dinner. But because of its round shape and small height, it wasn't pushed up against the big rectangular table, but would sit separately to one side, with its own little tablecloth, 3 or 4 place settings squeezed onto it. Enough for the 3 babes and maybe a cousin. And it looked adorable, so adorable that we babes were delighted to sit at it on little stools and look at us with our own little table, look, and our own salt and pepper. But the excitement didn't last. Because once the soup was out and the crackers were pulled and the chat and the banter and the passing of condiments had, begun in earnest, our table started to feel far away, isolated, adrift from the big table where all the noise and the action was. And the longer the meal went on, well, the more cut off we felt. If we said something, we were ignored. Nobody heard us above the din. They didn't even see us, down here, 2 feet below their eye line, at our own little table. We couldn't really see them either. Well, we saw their legs and the dusty underside of the big table and a bit of dried chewing gum stuck to it that Mammy Bliss would have had a conniption about if she knew. We had thought our own little table made us seem grown up, important, like grown-ups. But it actually did the opposite. It excluded us, made us smaller, invisible, and ignored. If you're not at the table, you're not part of the conversation. You don't get heard. And if you're not heard, decisions get made without you. Sometimes decisions get made in your best interest. But no one has ever asked you what's in your best interest. They just presumed to know. Society has a big table where decisions get made. And that big table, well, it's in the Dáil, it's in universities, it's in boardrooms and ministerial offices. The big table is crowded round in television studios and radio stations and jostled at in corporate headquarters and golf clubs and houses with gravel driveways. Everybody wants to be at the big table, and it can be a bit of a bun fight to grab a place at it. Some people are lucky, though. A place at the table was reserved for them, held for them by their parents or their school or their address or even their bank balance. Others fight their way to get to the table and manage to squeeze into a place or persuade some of the others to shove up a bit. But there are plenty more who never get anywhere near it. They aren't equipped for the pushing and the shoving, or they're tripped up on the way by people who already have a place and are wary of losing it, or they get shunted on the way by their accent or education or disability, shunted onto the small table where they can't be heard and they're below the eye line of the people at the big table, people who make decisions in their best interest. I have an outsider's place at that big table. To be honest, I'm a bit surprised to have it. There are a few things about me that I had assumed would disqualify me. Well, I mean, look at me. I don't really look like top table material. But the criteria for a place at the table can change sometimes. And I was also lucky enough to be equipped with other things that pushed me to the front. The right parents, the right education, the right color, ironically even, as Rory, the right gender. But not everyone gets a name card. And that matters. It matters who's at the table. It matters who gets to make the decisions. It matters whose voices are heard. We can't make the best decisions without all of the perspectives. And the people at the small table, out of earshot and below your eye line, they have a perspective. And from where they're sitting, they can see the chewing gum.